Welcome in, and this is the Legacy Right. I am the legacy of Jennifer and Kaiser. That's Andrew Joseph. We're back for another one, and it is going to be round two with Real Mad Max and an extra. But before that, before we jump into it, you know how it is. You know the deal. We got to go ahead and plug. We got to get that ad running. We got to start some business. Fanghornforesters.com for all your woodworking needs and necessities, knickknacks, from knife cutting boards to coasters to anything little or big. If you want to go big and get some millwork done, if you're in the greater Cincinnati area, because he'll come to you. He's with a mobile millwork business. So fanghornforesters.com. Let's get to the show. How are you doing today, Andrew?
I'm doing pretty good. How you doing, Zach?
I'm doing all right. Any introductions since the last time we spoke? Not that far off, actually.
No,
So
we've been doing pretty good. And just consistent, losing weight and working out.
losing weight and working out, fantastic. So where are you at on bench press wise?
No, I'm just talking about like working out, like exercise and stuff like that. Bench presses later.
No bench press. Nah,
Yeah, I
just
know.
walking around.
Well,
Sometimes just going on a walk. That's all that matters. Somebody
and
that's more
Sneaks is really good
motivation.
at that stuff too with the like calisthenics.
Mm,
He's always posting up his workout routines without no equipment necessary.
hmm Exactly. So, well, let's introduce. He already spoke, but here's Real Mad Max back at it again. And anything to say or get started for
Oh yeah,
yourself?
that real Mad Max on Twitter. Continuing to um continuing to lead the insurrection. And I'm looking forward to round two. I brought with me the ghost on my shoulder, the great individual that introduced me to you guys, and that's the Sneaks here. He frequently doesn't have a video feed, but if you hear him chiming in, it's one of my good buds that's truly dedicated to liberty, and I'm excited to go for round two.
Hmm.
Well, well, let's get it started there. And Sneaks, if you want to chime in and have any plugs of yourself that you want to throw in, you can if you like. So,
I'm
or
mostly just
just
gonna
say
hang
hi.
out, but I'm ungovernable. What's up?
Hey, what's
All
going on?
right, what's going
Oh,
on? So,
indeed.
well, let's get down to business now. So, when we last were talking, we jumped back and forth on many different topics, and it all came down towards one thing, and that's just the basic articulate ways, the different various ways, and how statism and I mean and authoritarianism kind of embellishes like all this jargon, like double speak in order to kind of control the narrative. So like, anything to add from last time out to get us started there, Max?
Yeah, I think I got a good transition with it. So, like we are talking about like the concept of propaganda and doublespeak. And when it comes to the what calls itself the government, when it comes to that entity's ability to convince the population that their form of control is necessary, the technique that is consistently used is this doublespeak version of natural rights. Because they take the natural
Hmm
rights and then encourage you to beg for them back. And so, kind of where I was coming from before is that if you accept the idea that there was a group of people that were very much aware of this technique and leaned into it instead of avoiding against it, then it's possible for me to imagine a world where two paper clips were sent to each side of the world in order to build a bipolar twin towers of world trade. that would then be demolished in order to create one central tower of world trade. And so I think the discussion becomes valuable when we get to the nuance of what would it look like to know that, to learn the secret formula to how to control population. What would it look like to learn that formula and then still try to set people free? And were there people within the Paperclip operation that were intentionally trying to jump the shark, as they call it, to prove that this top-down governance doesn't work? And that's where it comes back to, like, Sneaks calls himself ungovernable, because governance is a matter of fact. What calls itself government is a matter of pure speculation at this point. And we're at definitely a turning point when it comes to, like, the day-to-day reality of the American citizen. Like, this is on par with switching the dollar off of the gold standard. Like, the idea that we now switch the dollar off of the oil standard, because it's happened now. It's since I talked to you guys last, there's been 3 or 4 more internationally reported and recorded transactions for crude petroleum being carried out in a denomination that is not the US dollar. So we're going through a transition of what is considered valuable here as American people. And it's interesting that we're juxtaposing the challenge financially with the oil and the petrodollar and the fractional reserve banking. And then we're also facing that challenge relative to our border in terms of what it means to be a country built of immigrants versus what it means to have no idea what's going on inside of your own country. And so in a lot of ways, to me, this looks like the culmination, the pimple popping of everything that was not seen during the 2 Paperclip situation. And I think that if we calm ourselves down enough to look at it like it's a chessboard, we can get away from demonizing one group or the other and get to the heart of the matter of what we're actually trying to accomplish. So maybe that's a little bit long-winded, but that's where I see this conversation coming from.
Nothing's long-winded. I mean, good intro on that one. When you say Paperclip and then talk about everything that's going on, and I mean, what was coming to mind to me was you're taking that Paperclip, and over the years, the decades, and everything that's been going on behind the scenes in order to navigate and create certain narratives. So you have these centralized powers hang on to control. They've stretched that Paperclip almost to the point where it's no longer a Paperclip, no longer viable. So at this point, it sounds like with the collapse of the dollar inevitably, and the fact that the petrodollar is obviously no more, with transactions independent of the dollar occurring, and everything it seems like the house of cards is finally culminating and collapsing. So it seems to me that Paperclip has been stretched straight, and I mean it's just not viable. Like the only way back is to try to fold it back into place, but that's difficult to do. You can't really formulate a Paperclip back. So I mean, is that a good analogy?
If I was going to paint that as like the picture that came in my head, like the Paperclip that was supposed to be a maze of tying together our most common interests has been stretched so tightly that it's now more like a filament across the light bulb, and its only capability is to emit light and heat. It's never going to tie things together again. The promises of getting port have gotten too far apart, and now we're in a unique position where we, like as Americans, have to be able to claim what it looks like to be sovereign without that dominance. Because for a long time we've been spoiled because of the petrodollar reserve currency aspect, and that's not our actual role. And so now we have to take what we've learned through these influences of power and continue to be a positive influence in the world without asserting our influence everywhere in the world. And it's a bitter pill to swallow, but I think that's the stage that we're at currently.
Kind of go back to America before America of today, like before the Federal Reserve, before getting on the world stage with like the Panama Canal and like kind of going back to that 19th century standard. We're like, we've built ourselves up and we've given ourselves something in the world. We've set ourselves up to be a centerpiece on world affairs and in trade and even in politics and all this, to actually have some influence, some role to play in the world. But we weren't a superpower. We weren't the guy. We weren't the policeman. That was a void that was filled by someone else. And then we kind of got roped into it honestly at the end of World War II because Europe was in shambles. I mean, Great Britain they couldn't hold their empire anymore. They were too weakened from.
But in retrospect, and maybe this is unfair to say, but in retrospect, it's like it seems to me that we should have let Europe fall to shambles, not because not because fixing it wasn't better, but because the long term, it would have been better to pull the Band-Aid off, let all those powers collapse and restructure themselves. Stop pretending like it's our opinion that's the difference maker, even if it is. Like I would way rather focus on our relationship with Canada and with Mexico than I would with Europe. Like let's let the pieces fall where they may.
That's Austrian economics right there.
And it's great that you brought up the concept of Austrian, because like in Switzerland currently is a lot of where this global meta Austrian economics is coming from, where it's supposed to be one specific and consistent worldview. Some people are worried about the World Economic Forum. Some people notice that Putin's daughters go to school in Switzerland. Like some people not check where the Nazi gold went, where the Vatican gold went. Like, and it's all quite Austrian, and definitely the Swissy side of Austrian. And it's interesting, like the colors and the Templar. Like this is a breaking point between whether or not we should trust the system as a whole, or we should trust our ability to participate in a natural system that can't necessarily be defined. Because the decentralized system, the Adam Smith invisible hand, the actually anti-cap doesn't need a top-down governance system can never be proved. Because it exists in the meantime. And so while we're still battling over this concept of what's the best way to run the world, we're choosing sides for something. No matter which side you choose, you're fundamentally undermining your own ability to establish the type of governance that you can legitimately participate under. And that's what I think is changing really rapidly right now, because the powers that should not be are in fact collapsing right in front of us. I mean, whether it's the queen dying and saying that her son can only have 7 years to reign because she doesn't think he has the moral integrity to do what's right when the time is right. There's never been a queen's decree that limited the power of the next reigning one. We've never had a Jesuit pope before, because even like the pope in Regents that died 2 years ago, basically at the new thing, he was still technically the pope. He had just passed his duties down to the current pope that we have, who's a Jesuit pope. We've never had a Jesuit pope before. It's the very first time ever. We've never had a queen say that the royal family won't continue to have its power again. We've never seen the global reserve currency completely collapse right before our eyes. Like, and this is what makes it feasible to me and seem less in the conspiracy theory area, that there were indeed white hats that foresaw this exact circumstance and moved who they needed to move down to South America when it was time to move them down to South America, moved them up to North America currently when it's time to move them up to North America, and is completely restructuring the balance of power as we see it. Because if we were truly just committed and clinged on to the petrodollar, we would be done for. but the American people's ingenuity is valuable, and the South American people know that, and the South American people used to be North American people if you go back long enough in the history. And so this playing out of migration and the challenge that we're facing socially and politically is our opportunity to take a stand for what's legitimately important to us, because the borders that used to be don't matter that much anymore. All the old guard has passed away, and so now we're facing this in-between time where we're given the opportunity to actually try and stand up and make a definition and a grouping that work, that's positive, that produces positive results. And if we get caught up in the idea that anybody south of the border is not on our team, anybody north of the border is subject to Trudeau, all this stuff, it's going to be a mass distraction. That's specifically what it is. Whereas actually being able to team up with the people like-minded around you, whether they be from north or south of the border, has a lot more to do with creating the type of governance that is truly meant to walk this land, because it's ungovernable. The governance is us working together. And so I'm partially really hopeful, or like in a large part really hopeful right now, because a lot of the contradictions I see both domestically and globally in terms of like border disputes, whether it's Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Palestine, the US and their southern border, I see all of these pressures as coming to a head of what it actually means to team together to be a peoples, because I don't need to be of the same nationality, so to speak, to be on the same team. I need to be of the same ideology. And so when we get stuck in this idea that, oh, if they're south of the border, they're bad, if they're Israel, they're bad, or if they're Palestine, they're bad, or if they're Russia, they're bad, or if they're Ukraine, they're bad, it's this isolating dichotomy that's not effective towards actually moving forward, given that the system that we all used to rely on broke, and now everybody's doing their best to scramble without destroying everybody's life.
So what are your thoughts on the border issue, and especially with what's going on in the news? Texas and the federal government at a standstill now with their shenanigans. But what are your thoughts on the borders right now, and that is that part of the restructuring, or I mean, are they in a mass scramble, the powers that be, to just kind of unleash chaos, and therefore they have some sort of problem that they can come back in and fix? Or what's the deal with the border issue? Or is it just all propaganda on the news and really it's not that bad
now? So I do think that the border is exceptionally porous. So I do think that the reporting on it is very propagandized, but I do think the border is exceptionally porous. So the way that I see it when it comes to actually like politics, like nation building, like how to control the perspective of a group of people. So I think it's like the fifth Article 5 of the Constitution is the Convention of States. Might be off track on my numbers, but I'm pretty sure it's Article 5. In the Constitution is the Convention of States, where 2/3 of the state can basically hold the federal government to trial for violating states' rights. So the way that I see it is like this concept with immigration, being able to keep it right around the 50-50 mark, right? We'll even say it's 60-40 on the favor of the Texas side, because most Americans, no matter how blue their state is, don't want our entire border to become so porous that the entire economy collapses in on itself. So we'll call it 60-40, right, on the Texas side. The problem is you need that 65%, 66% to do the Convention of States to actually hold the federal government to account. So instead of all the things that we do agree on, banding together on the federal government's corruption, not just on the issue of the border, but on the entire issue of how things are funded and financed, I think that 2/3 of the American population would agree on auditing the federal government But what they've managed to do instead is give a hot button issue of the border, which does need to be solved, which is split 50-50. 50-50 is not 65%. So as long as they can keep it in that range of conversation where we're divided, because there's two good ways of looking at this. One is like everyone talks about it being military aged men that are crossing the border. You mean working aged men? You want to try literally, there isn't a single country in the world that wouldn't absolutely love 18 to 35-year-old men with no attachment to move into their economy. It's literally a battery jump starter. Every economy, if you add in 1 million people that fit that demographic, no families yet, just ready to work, do any given job, those are working class men. That's a great import for the US. But if we keep it divided, because like my biggest thing is like, I think that it should, with all the computer technology and everything, it should be extremely easy to put your thumbprint on a piece of paper, get your iris scanned by a thing, cross the border with a temporary deal. We'll call it asylum. The taxes you pay line up exactly with citizenship, but you don't have citizenship until you go through the rigmarole, and we can get into the rigmarole if it's useful. But ultimately, when it comes to the concept of the problem of people crossing the border, we could do thumbprint, eye scan, temporary passport pretty easily, and include all of these working age men into our economy, which desperately needs it. No matter how much they say AI is going to take away all the jobs, there ain't a robot yet that wants to go into your bathroom and unclog your sink. So there is plenty of immigrants that'll pick your strawberries for half that price. So it's hard to balance. And so I think that the powers that be use this division point because there's the logical view on both sides of why we should be able to handle it. We're a nation built on immigrants. We have plenty of space. Technically, we just need a system for doing it. The problem comes of when you let people in full stop, here's $3,000 cash and a cell phone that's not tracked, and then you just send them off to wherever. That doesn't work for the system overall. That's when you start getting social security numbers stolen and everything like that. Instead of stopping immigration, like we could just fix it and keep track of the working age people that actually want to come here and make a life for themselves, because it's a valuable thing to add to an economy. But as long as they can keep us on the idea of you either are or are not American, depending on if you are or not for people that are or not north or south of the border, then they keep us in that 50% margin where we can never actually make that referendum against the federal government itself and what policies it's choosing. So I think we need to look past these distractions of whether or not somebody's American because of where they were born and get back to whether or not someone's American based on what they believe. Anybody that's crossing the border that's trying to build a better life for themselves and their family and establish like a free and sovereign way of life, to me, is more American than half of our politicians, probably 3/4 of our politicians. So I don't have a problem with that. What I have a problem with is that we're not trying to solve the border situation. It's just being inflamed. And it's being inflamed to distract us and keep us divided so that we don't unite with our fundamental and obvious criticisms, is the way that I see it.
All right, can I tell them
go right ahead.
It's a Tower of Babel propaganda where, as Max was talking about, you have people who want to group together based on values. That theoretically is people coming in who want to work because they understand that when you work here, you make a better future for yourself. That's who's joining. Those are actually people I share values with, versus who is here and being educated within this country is being taught not to work, but to instead want to take from their neighbors to survive. Those are the children all around, the 19-year-olds, the 20-year-olds that are in colleges. They want their debt paid off because they made contracts they don't want to keep. And there's a whole thing with that. But I don't share values with those people. I do share values with a South American 22-year-old who wants to come dig trenches to make money, just to have a family. As opposed to us unifying with those folks, they're creating an artificial divide where they're seen as our enemy because of redistribution of wealth conflicts, taxation, the welfare system. They're like, oh, they're taking from you, but in fact they want to join forces with us cooperatively for our mutual benefits to build a better future together. And it's the people already around who want to take from us using a welfare system.
And I could not agree more on that when it comes to the artificial divides. I don't care what government your passport says you come from. If you're trying to live and let live and be part of a community of people that's trying to live, survive, and thrive without taking advantage of people, then I consider you on my team. And so I fully agree with that concept that being scared of the idea that they're taking away my welfare check is like, that's not, that doesn't scare me anymore. The government, I don't believe in the check anyway. I believe more in the person that's would rather dig a trench to water a garden than dig a tunnel for the cartel. And so they walked north. I connect way more with that person than I do with your average Washington, D.C. politician.
I know, I mean, they walk pretty damn far north. I mean, treacherous conditions. I mean, to say that they're all a bunch of criminals, like we're not getting each other's best. That's one of the propaganda. We're not getting our best. Yeah, there's gonna be some bad dudes that get withered into the crowd. But I mean, most of these people, I mean, you got people coming up anymore with their children, with babies, just because they're escaping all the fuckery that has occurred, mostly because of the United States and their meddling politically, economically, financially, all the corruption that has led to third world. I mean, Argentina knows because Argentina just elected what is supposed to be, and at least he presents himself as, and we'll see if it's true as he progresses, but they've elected a libertarian president, right?
Oh, yeah, that guy's wild.
Yeah. I mean, but why? Because for decades, for like 40, 50 years, Argentina has gone from one of the richest countries in South America, at least. I don't know if it was around the world, but one of the richest countries in South America, very stable economy. And then within 50 years, it's crumbling to this socialist garbage. I mean, that's what socialism does. It swallows everything whole and then spits it all out. And it's just a carcass that you can't use.
I got something to say on this with Argentina. It's specific. It's the type of thing that I normally try not to catch myself up with too much.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
So, like, if you take the idea that a lot of Germans moved to Argentina in World War II in 1942. So if you take that idea and you play it out over time, something that I find really interesting is that in Germany, when they dealt with hyperinflation, where you had to take a wheelbarrow full of marks just to get a loaf of bread, right? So this is a lesson that's been learned, the effect that it has on the people to produce money that way. Something that's very interesting to me that the Argentinian president said is that he said, I live in a country where houses are bought with $100 bills. He was talking about the American $100 bill, the actual greenback of it. So it's really interesting because the hyperinflation that America has chosen to engage in doesn't include printing more greenbacks. It's all digital. So those greenbacks are still hard to come by. And now you got flamboyant, I'll say, president of Argentina talking about how he doesn't have to worry about any of this international exchange rate stuff because they have greenbacks on their side. To me, it sounds like a way of accelerating the last straw behind the US dollar because we already lost the petrodollar. COVID proved that we can't just print money to get our way out of it. The only thing we have left is that there's not that many greenbacks. And so Argentina, of all countries, very coincidentally, is like, oh, we'll just run our whole country off dollars. make a real, actual, legitimate demand for it. It's only going to crash the system faster.
Oh yeah.
And so if there was a group of people that saw how the fiat currency was going to control and collapse society and did predict it, and they moved to Argentina, they might at this time choose a president that's going to go full-blown American US greenback just to accelerate the collapse of the fiat money. Because the problem with the sovereignty of an individual company or country didn't have to do with a religion per se. It had a lot more to do with usury. It had a lot more to do with the concept of how money is moved around within a country. And that's why if you remove the idea of usury from a country, you get a 1930s Germany that goes from the pits of despair to the peak of the world in a matter of a decade, where you can afford a car on 1 month's salary. You can afford an entire house to buy on 1 year's salary, like way different than where we're at in America. That all happens when you get rid of usury. But like when you tie that usury to a specific religion, then you lose track of what the actual problem is. And if you have to move to the literal other side of the world in order to reset and rebuild, knowing that usury is going to be the fundamental problem, then maybe you would set yourself up in a position to where you could be moving north right about now, back to your traditional latitudes. At the same time, you could be accelerating the collapse of the fiat US currency by taking the stand that you still think it's worth it. And so there is something to say about this concept of world builders. The Nazis will say that they're not all one group. The group, we can all agree that the Germans lost World War II. That's not without a doubt. The German people got eviscerated during the conclusion of that. But the Nazis that won are not all one single group. Like the Swiss Nazis and the Argentinian Nazis and the Antarctica Nazis and the ones that were paperclipped into the US and the USSR are all different branches of Nazis that did in fact win. They cracked the code of the matrix, so to speak, but all had different applications of what that meant. And from what I see, Switzerland decided that the whole world was going to rotate around them. And that's very narcissistic for my opinion. And I have a lot of problems with how like the Swiss Templars do things. And the Argentinian Germans, I can track with them mostly. Like I'll leave my hand and go to the opposite side of the world and prove to you that all I'm trying to do is just live my life. And I'll walk north when it's my time. I can see that happening. And then you have the Pope making an article about how people from the Americas are walking north with the spirit of Mary to reclaim their homeland. Like the current Pope said that. I made a tweet about it. So this challenge that we have of understanding that just because somebody chose something that's inconvenient doesn't make them a bad person. Just because somebody crossed the border doesn't mean they're not one of your tribes. Like where we agree is ideologically, and hopefully, and I get this with everybody here, where we disagree, we can agree to disagree. I'm not planning on coming over to your house and making you choose different. And so as long as these people crossing the border, from my perspective, as long as they're not coming here to make me choose different, then we're probably on the same team.
That's most of them are exactly that. They're just leave me alone. I'm just here to make a living, make a better life. The interesting thing about the use of greenbacks though, moving to the dollar standard for Argentina is, could that be a plan set in motion for the world builders to perpetually get closer towards a central bank digital currency?
100%. The idea behind the Argentina thing is literally just to burn the world supply of dollars. It's like I think they call them like naked shares in the stock market. People that pretend they have dollars because they have IOUs that they've lended out. I think they're called naked shares in the stock market. But Argentina to me looks like a specific attempt to burn up all of the naked shares. Like if you have a dollar, it's going to be used in Argentina then. And if Argentina doesn't have as many dollars as it says it has, that's going to come to a head. It's like an accounting equalizer.
And then and what's fascinating right there is like all the love that the libertarians here in America are showing Malay now that he's president. But when
God.
you tie it in, when you look at that situation and realize, hey, maybe there is something deeper. Maybe he's not your friend. He's not your idol that you should be looking at. Maybe there's something a little bit more sinister there. But it could be that we're just shooting the shit and all is actually fine and Argentina's
Yeah,
gonna
but at the same
see
time,
liberty, but
there's this one like bellwether that I frequently use. So there might be a few people out there who it's their true life and honorable path to get with their like family members, their cousins or something like that. But I don't think that's common. I don't think that's anything that should be noticeable. And whether it's Einstein divorcing his first wife to marry his cousin afterwards, or the Argentina guy cloning his dog so he can sleep with his cousin and his dogs in the same bed. There's certain things where, like, careful who you count as a champion. Because just because they have one idea right doesn't mean they're the type of person that's worth even hearing out. And I would greatly suggest people of a more anarchist or libertarian bent look into the history of this Argentinian president before taking it at face value. Because it certainly to me looks like a Trojan horse. I like it. Honestly, I want to see the dollar collapse faster, and the idea of just hard Argentinian president just being like, wahoo, the only thing we're accepting is dollar bills. And the entire world's like, are dollar bills worth it? We don't have to use dollar bills to buy oil anymore. Like, we can use any in Argentina's just like only dollar bills, no matter what. It's fascinating to me, but careful of the wolf in sheep's clothing, because there's a lot going on with that individual's pedigree and everything he was raised to be, which happens a lot for champions of the Workers' Party.
Medium, it creates a hot commodity that makes it a lot harder for you to be consistent when you got FOMO.
No, exactly. The float, the concept, everybody's always going to want a dollar. Therefore, I don't actually have to have one. I can just have an IOU, because as long as the IOU is in the dollars, everyone's going to want one. Starts to break down really fast once you get rid of the petrodollar. And then somebody else coming in saying like, well, if you want to spend dollars, that's all Argentina does, greatly accelerates the disambiguity of how many dollars are actually available, which is just so Argentinian, like, at least in 1492 perspective. Like, if they wanted to take down the bankers, it might have taken them 100 years too long, but decent technique as far as I can tell.
I mean, it is kind of a technique too, that acceleration is, and the more people that are on are working for dollars, the quicker that they print itself out of existence.
Yep.
So shelf life, everything's got a shelf life.
And that mechanism is definitely controversial because it causes a lot of pain. So I do like the white hat theory of a controlled descent, transfer us away from the broken dollar into something new without destroying everybody's lives entirely here. I'm okay with that concept. But at heart, I'm an accelerationist. I'm like, let's get this over with. I'm the one living it here. I'm tired of living in this lie. Let's find out the truth.
It's all very fascinating. It's also very fascinating that it seems like it all goes down. It centers to Argentina from the Nazis heading to Argentina and Brazil for that matter, but to Pope Francis. It all started like within this decade. It all starts with Pope Francis, and now you have this Malay fella that's there, and I mean, it does. It seems like it's centerfold. Like the plan is unraveling, and it was meant to be started in Argentina. You got a Jesuit and Francis. You got Malay that could be a Trojan horse. You got the dollar collapsing, and the country going to utilize that mechanism for the most part. Quite possible. That's the fast track. I mean, and then it goes back to the Nazis still exist and the Nazis are still here, playing their games and playing or fulfilling their influence and just building
Yeah,
their worldview.
that's why I see it as like there's at least two, probably three primary groups of these Nazis. Like some of them are like, so Aleister Crowley was called like the evilest man in the world, invented the 33rd and a half degree of the Freemasonship concept. Like in a similar way that the Nazis were considered the most evil group that ever, if you bring up an example of evil, people jump to Nazi really quick. But realistically, what we're talking about is wielding a measure of power, whether it's the power that the Nazis wielded or the power that Aleister Crowley wielded. And you can look at all of the 1900s music, early 2000s, even still to this day. If you don't understand the influence of Aleister Crowley, there's we do separate podcasts on that one. But the concept of seeing the evil in the world and becoming it in order to overcome it, I do see a white hat technique in that. I can see why somebody that recognized that the Nazis got the cheat code for how to control society would be like, oh, I might as well be part of this and run the cheat code to destroy the one thing that's destroying society. Or Aleister Crowley, I might as well be the most evil thing that's destroying all of this pop culture in order for it to get destroyed. The whole entire point of the white hat Nazi attempt would be that the Nazis would be destroyed in a way that would facilitate everybody. Whereas the black hat Nazi attempt is that when the Nazis get destroyed, the one world government that comes in to replace it controls everybody. Both ways the Nazis get destroyed. Both ways they have to pay the karma for the cheat code. But one way that they get destroyed facilitates people stepping into themselves. And the other way that they get destroyed facilitates people being subject to someone else. And I think that's where the true lines of demarcation lie. And that's why I'm not worried about what stamp somebody's passport has on it in terms of country. What I'm worried about is what it actually means to stand shoulder to shoulder in liberty. You can call me as evil as you want to. Call me Aleister Crowley, call me a Nazi. None of this stuff means anything to me as long as you'll stand next to me and preserve the freedom of both me and you, shoulder to shoulder. And so I think it's important that we let go of these ideas that just because something is a certain way, it's evil. Some people have put on their gas masks and gone down into the pits of evil just to create a drain plug so that we could all survive. It goes all the way back to like Sumerians when Gilgamesh told cast Enki down into the underworld and told him not to change anything, but he changed everything he wasn't supposed to change and came back, and they still have this competition to this day. That is our like polarized world. I'm allowed to disagree with you. I'm allowed to be from a different country than you. But what I'm not allowed to do is take away your ability to choose. And as long as you agree, I think we're on the same team.
Now, what's your perspective on the rise and expansion of communist Russia at the end of World War II? I mean, is that the reason why the Nazis or why Germany had to be defeated and the Nazis kind of disintegrated to their small patches, or was it always the plan to have two powers vying, or did that just happen?
So from my perspective, the Russians learned their lesson from the Bolshevik revolution revolution. And so the high ups, when it came to World War II, I think it was considered a necessary evil that the Soviet Union and the German nation would mutually destroy each other, and everything that was the Soviet Union. And I get the whole paperclip Cold War thing as a transition period, but everything that was the Soviet Union becomes like the CCP, more or less, like in our day's iteration. And so I think there was like the case that the white hat Nazis had to accept the mutual destruction between the Soviets because they were teamed up at first. They were going to redivide Poland away from the Austrians. Like it wasn't even supposed to be an issue, but they knew it would be an issue because they'd already dealt with the betrayal of the Bolsheviks. So they anticipated. It's like an M. Night Shyamalan movie that you've already seen before. Like you anticipate the twist ahead of time because you know this is what happened last time. And so the mutually assured destruction between running the war on two fronts instead of Germany just handling its eastward aggressors and then settling its western aggressors and then settling its dispute with its eastern half. Because as far as I can tell, with the exception of Switzerland, Russia and Germany did not have a problem of dividing up Poland at all. That was the initial pact. Like Russia wanted old Russia, which was half of Poland, and Germany wanted old Germany, which was half of Poland. And when Hitler invaded Poland, he was really just, it's like Putin in Crimea. He's really just reclaiming Germans from after the 30 years war bullshit that happened. And so I have a lot of skepticism around Switzerland as a result of this, because I don't like how they integrated the Austrian influence of deception into a miscommunication there. But ultimately, I think the paperclip group of people that went to the us and the usser acknowledged that what was the Soviet Union before the Cold War and what was the German nation before World War II, where they had to mutually destroy each other. And that was accepted. And that's why the final solution, I don't think, had to do as much with cremation as it did to do with transportation. That's me personally. But I think that it was accepted as a type of loss that had to happen because of the twist that was predicted, because they were familiar with it from both the World War I shenanigans with Germany and the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. I think the legitimate Northern Alliance, the people that like cold better than hot, were aware that everything was going to have to get switched up, and they all took the poison pill together. And that's why I think that there's so much confusion around the Holocaust, because nobody's clear who got killed and who got moved. And that's why I think there's so much confusion now, because we don't know who's moving. We don't know who's supposed to be where. We just know that everybody's moving. And so these are things that we all just have to stomach and swallow and realize you either can or cannot stand next to somebody in terms of liberty, in terms of somebody's either trying to stop you from choosing, or they're on the same team as you that wants to everyone to choose for themselves. And unfortunately, history betrays us like that. And all the stories go, we can't trust you can trust your ancestry, you can be proud of it, but everyone's betrayed the thing they love the most. Like the two Northern brothers betrayed each other on purpose in order to prove a point, from my perspective. And so this is what we're dealing with, and it's a challenge. But if we get caught up in these foolish divisions because they're popular or they're trending, who's crossing the border? No. I don't. The only border I care about being crossed is individual sovereign rights. That's it. It's the only border I'm concerned about. I don't give a flying fuck where you live. And I know for a fact that technologically speaking, we can account for everyone everywhere. So that's my passion point in it, is like, we have to accept that good and bad people did good and bad things in the past to get us to this point. And now the one thing that we cannot do is accept the given definitions for who's on our team. We actually have to be grounded enough to recognize who we stand next to and who we do not. And I think that's what was not seen. And I think that's what made it the White Hats plan valuable, to become the most evil thing in the world, whether it's Crowley or the Nazis. Call me the most evil, but if you stand next to me in sovereignty, then we're on the same team. Whether I'm evil or good doesn't hurt my feelings.
I mean, now in the end, I mean, everybody wants to be able to be left alone anyways. I mean, it's just those that do heinous things that eventually something will come at them. They'll get what they always get what they get. I mean, you don't know the future, but typically karma's a bitch. Yeah, typically karma's a bitch. So, I mean, Andrew, you got anything to add or?
I just think, you know, if people say you're a bad person, that gives you a lot of breathing room to hold them accountable for their own behavior.
Very accurate, sir. And expertly said in terms of political correctness. But 100% agree. So I only got a couple minutes here left. I was thinking I'll leave you guys with kind of a vague symbologically occult one that might be interesting that I wanted to work in here. Because like the Mexican flag like has like the eagle and the snake on it, right? The American flag has the eagle, right? And the Russian flag has like the two-headed eagle. But in like the German flag used to have the one-headed eagle, and then it switched to the two-headed eagle. And so there's an interesting thing between like the snake and the eagle. And I'm just talking symbologically now. So like the logic, suspend the logical disbelief, just listen to the sound of the symbols. So we have these symbols of this snake and this eagle. Well, so the snake in our Western tradition like symbolizes the concept of healing, like it's wrapped around the staff of the healer. There's like the two snakes. It's like any hospital that you look at, it's got the staff with the two snakes wrapped around it. And then you've got the eagle, which is like a symbol of perspective of the Lord of the land, because they never even have to touch down if they don't want to. And then you've got the South American concept of like Quetzalcoatl, which is like the feathered snake, which is like the flying eagle. And then you've got like the Iranian concept of like the griffin. I call it Iranian. It doesn't have, I'm not trying to be too specific, but it's sure. They're like Aryans, Iranian, Iran, so far away from Persians, who Zoroaster was, all those different things. But the so like the concept of like the lion that is that Middle Eastern griffin that represents the combination between gold and mercury alchemically losing its wings and becoming a lion sitting in the desert like the Sphinx is, and then and then Quetzalcoatl losing his feathers and becoming the snake that you don't step on if you're dealing with the South. I think in the archetypal form of human history, the concept of how many ways the eagle is looking at it, is it looking at it one way, or does it have a pair of sights? And are those parasites adopting the snake that it's hunting, or is the hunting of the snake a way of pointing out the idea that the eagle and the snake were always together from the beginning, and that's the feathered snake that is the dragon, that is Quetzalcoatl, that is the red-headed druid Aryans that traveled to all the different nations ahead of time that said, when I'll come back, it'll be back. And now we're looking at a griffin stripped of its wings, sitting like a cat in the desert. And now we're looking at a snake stripped of its wings, or a dragon stripped of its wings, sitting in the rainforest. And these psychological combinations of what I think are the spirit animals of entire societies are relearning what trauma they've gone through in order to re-become what they were always meant to be. And so I thought I did a pretty good job of keeping it pretty specific and historical up until this last part. And that last part's a little bit mythological with the snake and the griffin and what you were supposed to be and not supposed to be, and the wings and the not wings. But I think the overlap between seeing the story of what it means to soar from a national perspective lends itself to what is not seen by the atrocities that the Nazis assumed by moving to the opposite side of the world so that they could reclaim things after things were broken.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really hard to get into those mythological zones and like really land a point hard, because the symbols mean so many different things from so many different ways. But I do think that there's something really significant to the heart of the people marching towards their homeland. And I personally don't care what passport stamp they have. When people get to the area that they know how to survive in, and they can stand shoulder to shoulder in liberty with the people next to them, that's the world. That's the great reset I'm looking for. I don't care what the borders say. I don't care what the World Economic Forum say. I just care if you're my neighbor and you can stand next to me. That's what I'm looking for. So that's my mic drop on that one, I guess.
Mic drop.
There you go. I don't have a mic to drop. I shouldn't drop this, brother. Thank you.
So, no, that's the only thing that matters right there. So, and that's a good way to kind of segue this to the end. So, you said you only had a couple minutes, so we will respect that. We could go on for probably
we got
another hour. We could, we could go on for days.
We're only honing in on it. We just barely scratched the surface this time.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's it. But that's how it is. I mean, a clash of ideas. What did Pat say? Clash of ideas springs more ideas. I mean, we're just scratching the surface here, and I mean, we'll have more to tell no matter what. So continue forward. So with that, anybody have any final thoughts? Andrew, you want a final thought?
Well, there's definitely foreshadowing for the next time you come on. It'd be really interesting.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's ridiculous, especially the progress between last time. We covered basically the exact same topics as this time, but this time we covered them way more specifically. If we do the same thing next time, one of us is going to get canceled, and it's going to be awesome.
Right.
Well, you know what they say. They say that if you aren't canceled, you haven't made it. So if one of us or if all of us get canceled,
shoot for the stars. Yeah, it'll probably be all of us.
We'll all get canceled the next time we come together, and that'll be fine. We know we made it. We'll figure it out from there, right? So
I'll see you in the gulag.
I'll see you in a Nazi concentration camp.
Yeah,
those seem like they're nicer.
Yeah, you might see the shell of my 9mm on the ground, but you won't find me in the gulag or the concentration camp, because liberty or death, motherfucker.
Right.
Yep. So, I didn't say why I would be in the concentration camp.
Oh yeah, no. Hey,
I'm in the uniform.
You're gonna be the one setting off the little charges underneath the window just to get the people out of there. No, that's all good stuff, man. And we'll get more and more specific. And I like the questions. And like, these are really hard topics to address, because we're talking about reshaping people's entire worldviews. And so I think that, like, even taking this step further into like the clarity of the conversation is useful. And I think diffusing the conflict between the aliens, like the people from other countries, versus I think it's very valuable to recognize that your teammates are your teammates no matter where they're from, versus getting caught up on this media and social media propaganda that somebody's coming across the border to take what's yours. That's not what's happening. What's yours is already gone. People that are coming across the border are either on your team to take it back or they're not. And it's up to your own personal perception.
So keep that in mind, and tough shit, basically. So cheers to that, and liberty or death. And but with that, once again, that is RealMadMaxx. Follow him on Twitter at RealMadMaxx.
2 X's.
We have 2 X's. That'll be in the show notes as well, as always. We also had Sneaks, or Be Ungovernable, at Be Ungovernable. You can find him as well on Twitter, or X, whatever you want to call it. Andrew, he has his name right there, man. AI Conan, at AI Conan 90 is where you can follow him on X. You can also find him somewhere on Facebook if he's lurking, if he's available, but I don't know how to get to that one. That's weird.
Yeah.
You can also find him on Telegram if you want to jump in and say hi.
/Dr. Sauce.
So, but
Hologram is for
again,
right extremists. I don't.
Something
I
like
can
that,
tell
yeah.
just by looking at Andrew, it's all bad. No, I'm just kidding.
it is. It is. It's
a
very
great
bad.
round 2, and I look forward to round 3. And
So
yeah, if any of the listeners got any specific questions too about like what it looks like between the transfers of powers when you get above nationalism, and like how world building works, and how like the double reverse of everybody spying on each other was all pre-planned and stuff, like these are really hard topics to unpack conversationally. So if there's any point that catches somebody up that like they have a historical point that they like clarified, I'd love to clarify my perspective on it, because these are really tricky topics, and it's important to be able to bring your perspective like without feeling like you're asking a dumb question. So I look forward to continuing to unpack this with you guys, and I appreciate the opportunity.
I thank you once again. Yeah, once again, it's always fun. So definitely gonna do it again. We'll have to set something up, and but until then, let's wind this up and get on out of here. This is the legacy, right? So I am the legacy of Jennifer Ant Kaiser, Zachary Kaiser, Andrew Joseph, RealMadMaxx, Be Ungovernable, and let's take it off. Let's get on out of here. Peace.
Thanks, guys. Pleasure doing business with you.
See ya.